Hi everybody, welcome to Simply Scuba. Today I typed in one of the most important pieces of dive gear into Google and I'm answering questions about SPGs. Now I always dive with at least one, so let's answer some questions about them. What is a scuba SPG? An SPG is your submersible pressure gauge. It's what we use to see how much air pressure is left inside of our cylinders so that we know roughly how much breathing gas we have left inside. It's a lot like a petrol gauge on a car. SPGs will either measure the pressure in bar or PSI, depending on where you are in the world, and they'll be fitted to a high pressure hose that connects to your regulator. SPG officially refers to just the pressure gauge. That tells you how much pressure is in your cylinder, but some divers use the term to refer to the entire console of gauges. That might include a depth gauge and a compass as well as the main one, which is tank pressure. Nowadays we have a few digital gauges, one from Cressy, the Digi 2, which is a digital pressure gauge, and a depth gauge as well, which is attached to a hose that connects to your regulator. We also have other air integrated dive computers that blend the pressure gauge and your dive computer together into one item, but the more popular option is wireless air integration with a wireless transmitter that's fitted to your regulator that talks to your dive computer on your wrist so that you can see your tank pressure on your computer screen, and it just reduces the overall number of hoses. But an SPG is how we know how much air is in our cylinder. What does FSW in diving mean? Feet of sea water, which is used to indicate either an actual depth or just a pressure equal to that depth. We also have MSW for the metric equivalent, meters of sea water, and we also have FFW and MFW. There's going to be lots of TLAs, I'm afraid. Those two mean feet of fresh water and meters of fresh water. Because we don't often bring tape measures down with us to measure the exact distance below the surface we're at, so we use the water pressure around us to work out how deep we are. And because seawater is salty, go figure, the change in pressure is actually a little bit different as you descend compared to fresh water. If you use a depth gauge that's calibrated to seawater in fresh water, you're actually going to be a little bit deeper than your depth gauge actually says you are. A lot of dive computers will actually have a water selection somewhere in the menu structure where you can pick and choose between the two, whether you're diving in freshwater or saltwater. Some dive computers you can actually choose the exact salinity of the water that you're diving in, if you know that. But if you are diving between salt and back to fresh water, then while the difference is relatively small, it is best if you do change your computer for accuracy, because whilst it's thinking you're at like 33 feet, you're actually at 34 feet. Sure, it's not a huge difference, but it is best to be accurate, which is why we use FSW and MSW in salt water. Can I use a DIN regulator on a yoke valve? Sometimes. It depends on the valve though. Most modern valves are a little bit of both. You'll find a hex hole in the center where the air comes out of the valve that you can actually use an Allen key to remove a central nut that we call a donut, because it has a hole in the middle. We're not that imaginative with our naming, but with the donut fitted into the valve, it has an O-ring on the outside so that you can fit an A-clamp or a yoke regulator onto it. But if you remove that donut, you can then screw your DIN regulator into where the donut used to be. So it's a bit of both. You'll only find these donuts on 232 bar or 3400 PSI valves. Higher pressure tank valves all tend to be DIN, but you can still find some older valves on low pressure cylinders that are purely A-clamp in certain corners of the world that don't have donuts at all. In this case, you need an A-clamp adapter, which is effectively an A-clamp with a DIN fitting on the other end that you can screw onto your DIN regulator to make it temporarily into an A-clamp regulator. So yes, you can fit a DIN regulator to a yoke valve. You just need either an 8mm Allen key to remove a donut or an A-clamp adapter. What should I do to prevent mask squeeze? Exhale through your nose. This is one of the main reasons to have your nose covered up by your diving mask so that you can exhale through your nose into the mask. Because the pressure around you increases the further you go down, the volume of the air inside of your mask in front of your face actually compresses down, which can cause some damage to your face. But all you need to do to prevent that is just to exhale through your nose a little bit. Now, this is very easy on Scuba. You inhale through your mouth, through your regulator, and you exhale through your nose, and then you breathe in again through your regulator. Whilst freediving though, and while you're holding your breath underwater, you only have that one lungful to get you down and then back up again. You don't want to be wasting that valuable air inside of your lungs, equalizing your mask as you go down, so freedivers tend to wear low volume masks. With a low volume of air on the inside of the mask to start with, it reduces the amount of the squeeze effect, but it doesn't eliminate it 100%. To prevent mask squeeze altogether, some free divers just don't wear a mask at all. But for scuba divers, just breathe out of your nose a little bit. That's how you equalize the squeeze. Should I keep some air in my cylinder? Yes. The only time your dive cylinder should be empty is when it's being tested. As long as you have a few bar or PSI of pressure inside of your cylinder, then that pressure is always going to be pushing out of the valve and pushing any moisture and contaminants that are trying to get in. We want to keep those contaminants out, so always leave a little bit inside of your cylinder. Because of this, it's always best to keep your cylinder with some gas inside, and some filling stations now won't even fill a completely empty cylinder without an internal check first, because while it may be in test and look nice and shiny on the outside, if it's completely empty, there's a higher chance that it's rusty and nasty on the inside and might go bang when they go to fill it. So they like to double check completely empty cylinders. Now, if you're storing your cylinders for any length of time, say 6 weeks or more over the winter period, for example, it's worth draining it down to about 10 bar, because in higher pressures, that gas can go stale on the inside of your cylinder, and then trust me, you don't want to use it after that period. And it's better if you store them upright as well, so that any contaminants that have found their way inside of the cylinder don't collect down the walls of the cylinder, which are the weakest part. You want it down at the bottom, which is the toughest part. But always leave a little bit of pressure inside of your cylinder to keep any nasties from getting in. And there we have it. I started off with SPGs and ended up talking about dive cylinders. Go figure, good old Google. But remember to head over to simplyscuba.com if you're ever in need for an SPG or an A-clamp adapter, because we sell them all. And of course, head over to our Instagram as well. Just search for @simplyscuba and you should find us. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.